The examination hall stretched out like a cathedral of glass and steel, its ceiling disappearing into shadows far above. 300 cadets sat in perfect rows, each at their own terminal, bathed in the soft blue glow of holographic displays. This was the Galactic Military Academy's final exam, the test that separated graduates from failures, the challenge that would define their entire careers. Commander Hyun-ki stood at the front of the hall, his scaled hands clasped behind his back. He was Valkyrian, a species that looked like someone had crossed a lizard with a businessman. His scales shifted colors slowly, from deep purple to midnight blue, reflecting his calm mood. He had administered this exam 43 times over his career. He knew exactly what would happen. The cadets would receive the scenario, spend 6 hours crafting detailed theoretical responses, and most would fail to impress him. A few might show genuine tactical insight. None would truly solve the problem, because the problem was designed to be unsolvable. Ji-woo sat in the third row, her terminal humming to life as the exam parameters loaded. She was human, which made her somewhat unusual but not unique. There were 8 other humans in this graduating class, scattered throughout the hall. Humans had been part of the galactic community for 70 years now, long enough to be familiar but not long enough to be fully understood. Most species considered them average. Decent enough at most things, exceptional at very little. The scenario materialized on her screen. Colony Kepler 442b, a mining outpost with 15,000 civilians. 3 defense platforms. 2 patrol corvettes. 1 outdated frigate. 6 squadrons of fighters. Minimal planetary shields. The enemy fleet appeared next, and Ji-woo felt her stomach tighten. 37 warships. Heavy cruisers. Carrier groups. Enough firepower to turn the colony into dust within hours. Around her, cadets began typing furiously. She could hear the clicking of keys, the soft hums of recording devices as some candidates verbalized their strategies. A Centauri cadet 2 rows ahead was already sketching evacuation routes. A Threxian to her left muttered calculations about force distribution. Ji-woo read through the scenario 3 times. She checked the colony's resources, the terrain data, the composition of the enemy fleet. She noted the time delay in communications, the position of nearby asteroid fields, the locations of fuel depots, and mining equipment. She absorbed it all like a sponge soaking up water. Then she stood up. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor echoed through the hall. Heads turned. Commander Hyun-ki's scales rippled, shifting toward orange, which in Valkyrian body language indicated surprise. Ji-woo walked down the aisle between terminals, her boots clicking against the polished floor. Every eye in the examination hall followed her. She reached the commander's podium and stopped. Hyun-ki looked down at her, his vertical pupils narrowing. "Cadet Ji-woo," he said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "The examination period is 6 hours. You have used 20 minutes. "Yes, sir," Ji-woo replied. Her voice was steady, calm. "I've finished reading the scenario." A ripple of whispers spread through the hall. Finished reading? The scenario documents were extensive, packed with data that required hours to properly analyze. Hyun-ki's scales shifted to a curious yellow-green. "You have finished reading," he repeated slowly. "Not finished your response." "I have a question before I respond, sir." Ji-woo met his gaze without flinching. "Do you want me to run it live? Or just show you the debrief?" The hall fell absolutely silent. Hyun-ki blinked, all 3 of his eyelids sliding across his eyes in sequence. "Explain your question, cadet." Ji-woo gestured toward the massive holographic projector that dominated the center of the examination hall. It was typically used for demonstrations and lectures, capable of rendering complex 3-dimensional battle scenarios in perfect detail. The exam asks us to propose a defensive strategy for an impossible situation. Standard protocol is to write a theoretical response explaining what we would do and why. But the simulation systems are active. I can run the scenario live and show you what I would do instead of just telling you. Commander Hyun-ki studied her for a long moment. In his 4 decades of teaching, no cadet had ever made such a request. The live simulations were considered too time-consuming for examinations, too complex for a single cadet to manage effectively. They were teaching tools, not testing tools. But something about this human's confidence intrigued him. There was no arrogance in her posture, no bravado in her tone. She simply seemed certain that she had a solution worth demonstrating. His scales rippled through several colors as he considered, finally, settling on a neutral gray-blue. Very well, Cadet Jiwoo. You may run your scenario live. You have the remaining 5 hours and 40 minutes. He gestured toward the central projector. Show us your solution. Jiwoo bowed slightly and walked to the control terminal beneath the projector. Her fingers moved across the interface, linking her personal terminal to the main system. The projector flared to life, filling the air above the examination hall with a perfect three-dimensional rendering of Colony Kepler 442b. The other cadets abandoned their own work, turning their chairs to watch. This was unprecedented. The proctors and assistant instructors moved closer, curious about what would happen next. Commander Hyun-ki folded his arms, his face unreadable. The simulation began. The colony appeared as a cluster of dome structures on a rocky planet, defense platforms orbiting in a standard triangular formation. Jiwoo's defending forces showed as blue icons. The approaching enemy fleet materialized at the edge of the tactical display, a threatening mass of red icons sliding toward the colony like a crimson tide. Jiwoo took manual control of the defending forces. Her first orders made several cadets gasp. She was splitting her forces, dividing her already outnumbered ships into smaller groups. One Dravarian cadet actually laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. She is giving them victory, he muttered to his neighbor. But Jiwoo's hands never stopped moving. She sent one corvette on what appeared to be a suicide run toward the enemy fleet's left flank. She positioned her fighters in scattered formations that violated every principle of mutual support. She ordered the frigate to abandon its defensive orbit and accelerate toward the planet's moon. The enemy fleet, controlled by the Academy's advanced tactical AI, responded exactly as galactic military doctrine dictated. They concentrated fire on the corvette. They moved to envelope the scattered fighter squadrons. They ignored the frigate's retreat as the action of a commander recognizing inevitable defeat. That was their first mistake. It would not be their last. Jiwoo's fingers danced across the controls. The corvette that seemed to be making a suicidal attack suddenly changed vector, using the enemy's concentrated fire as cover to deploy a spread of sensor drones. The scattered fighter squadrons were not random at all. They were positioned at precise points that forced the enemy fleet to split its attention and disperse its formations to engage them. And the frigate that had retreated to the moon was now doing something that made Commander Hyun-ki lean forward, his scales brightening with interest. It was using the moon's mass to catapult itself on a new trajectory, building velocity for a high-speed strike on the enemy fleet's rear elements. The battle unfolded like a brutal chess game, except Jiwoo was playing by rules that the AI had never encountered. She sacrificed pieces without hesitation, trading a squadron of fighters to lure 3 enemy cruisers into the range of her defense platforms. She used the colony's mining equipment as improvised weapons, detonating fuel depots and collapsing mine shafts to create debris fields that disrupted enemy sensors. An hour into the simulation, the pattern became clear to the watching instructors. Jiwoo was not trying to fight honorably. She was not following any recognized tactical doctrine. She was fighting to win by any means necessary, and the costs did not seem to concern her. Her casualty rates were astronomical. She had lost half her fighter squadrons. One corvette was destroyed, but the enemy fleet was bleeding too, and bleeding badly. The examination hall had transformed from a testing center into a theater, with 300 cadets and 24 instructors watching a single human cadet wage war against an AI that represented centuries of refined military doctrine. Jiwoo's eyes never left the holographic display as the battle reached its critical phase. 2 hours had passed since she began the simulation, and the examination hall remained absolutely silent except for the soft hum of the projector and the occasional gasp from watching cadets. The enemy fleet had pushed deep into the colony's defensive zone, confident in their numerical superiority. They had destroyed one of Jiwoo's corvettes and decimated her fighter squadrons. By any conventional measure, the battle should have been over. But conventional measures did not seem to apply to whatever strategy the human cadet was implementing. Commander Hyun-ki watched as Jiwoo executed a maneuver that made his scales flash bright orange with alarm. She ordered her remaining corvette to ram an enemy cruiser at full speed. Not a weapon strike, not a boarding action, but a deliberate collision that would destroy both ships. The corvette's crew, simulated by the AI, hesitated for 3 seconds before executing the order. Those 3 seconds of hesitation told Hyun-ki something important. Even the simulation's AI found the order unexpected and extreme. The corvette struck the enemy cruiser amidships. Both ships exploded in a brilliant flash of light. But the debris from the explosion scattered directly into the path of 2 more enemy vessels, forcing them to break formation and waste precious seconds maneuvering to avoid the wreckage. In those seconds, Jiwoo's defense platforms acquired target locks and fired. 2 more enemy ships took critical damage. A Threxian instructor standing near Hyun-ki made a clicking sound of disapproval. "Wasteful," she muttered. "Trading a functional ship for minor tactical advantage. The casualty rates are unacceptable." But Hyun-ki said nothing. He was beginning to understand what he was witnessing. Jiwoo was not calculating acceptable losses the way they taught at the academy. She was calculating winning. There was a difference, and that difference was profoundly disturbing. The battle continued. Jiwoo pulled her battered fighter squadrons back toward the colony. But she was not retreating. She was baiting. The enemy fleet, sensing victory, pressed forward aggressively. They pushed past the outer defensive perimeter, entering the space where the colony's minimal planetary shields could provide some protection to the defending forces. Then, Jiwoo triggered the trap she had been building for the past 2 hours. The mining colony of Kepler 442b extracted rare minerals from deep underground. The process required massive amounts of explosives to break through dense rock layers. For the past hour, while the battle raged in orbit, Jiwoo had been quietly evacuating mining tunnels and repositioning explosive charges. She had turned the entire colony into a weapon. She detonated the charges. The explosion was not nuclear, not even particularly advanced by military standards. It was simply enormous. 30 mining sites exploded simultaneously, throwing billions of tons of rock and dust into the planet's thin atmosphere and beyond. The debris cloud expanded rapidly, engulfing both the colony and a significant portion of the orbital battlespace. The enemy fleet sensors went blind. Their formation scattered as ships lost visual contact with each other. In the chaos, Jiwoo's remaining forces struck like knives in the dark. Her fighters, already positioned within the debris cloud, had target locks on enemy ships that could no longer see them. Her defense platforms, equipped with shorter range but more accurate weapons, fired through gaps in the dust that Jiwoo had calculated would remain clear. The enemy fleet panicked. They began firing blindly, hitting their own ships as often as they hit Jiwoo's forces. They tried to retreat, but Jiwoo had positioned her last functional ship, the frigate, behind them during its earlier moon slingshot maneuver. It attacked their rear elements, preventing an organized withdrawal. What followed was not a battle but a slaughter. The enemy fleet, vastly superior in numbers and firepower, tore itself apart in confusion and chaos. Jiwoo's forces, reduced to barely functional remnants, picked off survivors with cold efficiency. When the debris cloud finally began to settle, 30 minutes later, the holographic display showed the results. Of the 37 enemy warships, 31 were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 6 had managed to retreat beyond the engagement zone. Colony Kepler 442b was intact, its population safe in underground shelters. Jiwoo had won. The cost appeared in red numbers on the display. She had lost 63% of her military forces. Casualty estimates for her fighter pilots and ship crews reached into the hundreds. The colony itself had suffered significant infrastructure damage from the mining explosions. By galactic military standards, These losses were catastrophic, borderline criminal for a defending commander. By human standards, Jiwoo had achieved an overwhelming victory against impossible odds. She stepped back from the control terminal and turned to face Commander Hyun-ki. Her expression was neutral, professional. Simulation complete, sir. Colony defended successfully. Enemy fleet destroyed or routed. Do you want me to prepare a formal tactical debrief? Hyun-ki stared at her. His scales had gone completely white, a color that in Valkyrian body language indicated profound shock. Around the examination hall, cadets sat frozen in their seats. Some looked amazed. Others looked horrified. A few looked sick. A young Centauri cadet named Taemin raised his hand tentatively. He was one of the other human cadets in the class, sitting near the back of the hall. "Sir," he said quietly, "I think I should mention something." Hyun-ki turned toward him, grateful for any distraction from the display he had just witnessed. "Speak, Cadet Taemin." The human stood up slowly. He looked uncomfortable, like someone about to confess to a crime. "Sir, what Jiwoo just did is not unusual for human tactical doctrine. It is actually quite restrained compared to some of our historical battles." The examination hall erupted. Cadets began talking all at once, their voices rising in disbelief and alarm. Restrained? What they had just witnessed was restrained. Commander Hyun-ki raised one scaled hand, and the hall fell silent again. "Explain," he said simply. Taemin glanced at Jiwoo, who nodded slightly. "Humans have been fighting wars against each other for our entire history, sir. We developed nuclear weapons and used them on our own cities. We created chemical and biological weapons. We perfected the concept of total war, where entire populations become targets. What Jiwoo demonstrated is what we call conventional warfare. She did not use weapons of mass destruction. She did not target civilians. She accepted high casualties among her own forces to protect the colony's population. By human standards, this was a very clean operation." The Threxian instructor who had criticized Jiwoo's tactics earlier made a sound like breaking glass. "This is barbarism," she said flatly. "These are not military tactics. This is savagery dressed in uniform." Jiwoo turned to face the instructor. Her voice remained calm and respectful, but there was steel underneath. "Professor Wei-Lin, I understand your perspective, but the exam scenario presented an impossible situation. The colony could not be defended using conventional galactic tactics. The enemy fleet was too large, too well equipped. Standard doctrine would result in the colony's destruction within hours. I was asked to defend the colony. I defended it. The civilians are alive. The enemy is defeated. That was my mission objective." "At what cost?" Wei-Lin demanded. "You sacrificed hundreds of military personnel." "I saved 15,000 civilians," Jiwoo replied. "That was the acceptable trade." The word acceptable seemed to hang in the air like smoke. To the galactic military mind, trained in optimization and efficiency, Jiwoo's casualty rates were unacceptable by definition. But to the human cadet, they were simply the price of victory. Commander Hyun-ki made a decision. He pressed a button on his podium, and a soft chime echoed through the hall. "All cadets are dismissed. The examination is postponed pending administrative review. Return to your quarters and await further instructions." The cadets filed out slowly, many of them looking back at Jiwoo as they left. She stood alone by the control terminal, waiting. When the hall was empty except for Hyun-ki and a few senior instructors, the commander approached her. "Cadet Jiwoo," he said quietly, "what you have demonstrated today presents a significant problem. You have shown tactical capabilities that are outside the bounds of accepted military doctrine. I need to understand if this is an individual aberration or a representative sample of human military capability." Jiwoo met his gaze steadily. "Sir, I am a slightly above-average tactical student by human military academy standards. I am not exceptional among my species. If you are asking whether other humans could replicate what I did, the answer is yes. Many could do it better." Hyun-ki's scales went white again. He turned to the other instructors, all of whom looked equally disturbed. We need to contact the Academy's Administrative Council immediately. This matter goes beyond a simple examination. As the instructors hurried away to make their calls, Jiwoo remained standing by the terminal. She looked up at the holographic display, which still showed the aftermath of her simulated battle. Debris fields, damaged ships, the colony intact but scarred. She wondered if she had made a mistake by being honest. But the question had been asked, and she had answered it truthfully. Humans knew how to win wars. They had been doing it to each other for thousands of years. The galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. The Administrative Council meeting began 3 hours after Jiwoo's simulation ended. Commander Hyun-ki sat at a curved table with 8 other senior officials from the Galactic Military Academy, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of data screens. Above them, the recording of Jiwoo's battle played on a massive holographic display, frozen at the moment when the mining charges detonated. Admiral Boare, a crystalline being from the Centauri system, spoke first. Her voice chimed like wind through glass. Commander Hyun-ki, I have reviewed the simulation records 17 times. I need to be certain I understand correctly. This cadet achieved victory in a scenario designed to be unwinnable. And she claims this capability is not unique to her but common among her species.
Hyun-ki nodded slowly.
That is correct, Admiral. Cadet Taemin, another human in the same class, confirmed that Jiwoo's performance would be considered above average but not exceptional by human standards. The council chamber fell silent. The weight of that statement settled over everyone like a heavy blanket. Finally, a Dravarian general named Kwan Ho spoke up. His species resembled walking stone sculptures, and his voice rumbled like distant thunder. We need a human expert to explain this, someone who can provide historical and cultural context. I have already sent for one, Hyun-ki replied. Professor Deun is on her way. She is human, a historian who specializes in military history and cultural evolution. She should arrive within minutes. While they waited, the council reviewed more footage from the simulation. They watched Jiwoo sacrifice her corvette. They watched her detonate the mining charges. They watched her forces fight with a ferocity that seemed divorced from rational calculation. Each viewing made them more uncomfortable. Professor Deun arrived wearing the simple gray robes that marked her as an academic. She was older than Jiwoo, perhaps in her 50s, with gray streaking through her black hair. She bowed respectfully to the council and took her place at a small podium facing them. Professor Deun, Admiral Boare began, we need you to help us understand what we witnessed today. Is Cadet Jiwoo's tactical approach representative of human military thought? Deun took a deep breath before answering. Yes, Admiral. What Jiwoo demonstrated is well within the mainstream of human tactical doctrine. I would characterize it as moderately aggressive by our standards, but not extreme.
Moderately aggressiva. General Kwanu rapata slowly.
She lost 60% of her forces and considered it acceptable. She saved the colony and defeated an enemy 3 times her size, Deun replied. By human military standards, that is an overwhelming success. We measure victory in outcomes, not in elegance of execution. Commander Hyun-ki leaned forward. Professor, you need to help us understand why humans think this way. Most galactic species developed unified planetary governments before reaching space. They learned cooperation and optimization during their early history. Human history must be different. Deun nodded and tapped her data pad. The holographic display changed, showing a timeline of human history. Humans reached space while still divided into hundreds of competing nations. We fought wars continuously throughout our recorded history. Major conflicts, minor conflicts, civil wars, world wars. We developed nuclear weapons and used them on each other while we still lived on a single planet. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Deun continued, her voice steady but sad. We created weapons designed specifically to cause maximum suffering. Nerve gas, biological plagues, weapons that would kill slowly and painfully to terrorize enemy populations. We developed the concept of mutually assured destruction, where the only deterrent to war was the promise that everyone would die if it started. Admiral Boare made a sound like cracking ice. How did your species survive? Barely, Daun admitted. We came close to extinction several times. But survival required us to become very, very good at warfare. While other species were learning mathematics and art and philosophy, humans were learning how to kill each other efficiently. While you were building utopias, we were building weapons. While you were writing peace treaties that lasted centuries, we were perfecting the arts of deception, ambush, and total war. The display changed again, showing human military conflicts throughout history. Ancient battles with swords and spears, medieval sieges, industrial age trench warfare, nuclear standoffs, space naval combat in the early days of human expansion beyond Earth. The critical difference, Daun explained, is that human warfare is not mathematical. We do not seek optimal solutions. We seek victory through any means available. We are comfortable with chaos, with unpredictability, with accepting terrible costs if it achieves our objectives. To you, this seems barbaric. To us, it is simply reality. A Valkyrian counselor named Youngsik spoke up. But humans have been peaceful members of the galactic community for 70 years. You have not started wars. You have not caused conflicts. Daun smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because we learned from our history. We know what war costs. We understand its horrors better than any species in this galaxy. We do not want war. But not wanting war and being incapable of war are very different things. What you saw Jiwoo do today is what every human military officer learns. We hope we never need to use it. But we are very, very capable of using it if we must. The council sat in stunned silence. Finally, Admiral Boare asked the question that everyone was thinking. Professor Daun, if humanity went to war with the galactic community, what would happen? Daun looked at each council member in turn. We would lose. You have more ships, more resources, more people. But it would be the bloodiest war in galactic history. We would use every dirty trick we know. We would fight from asteroids and moons. We would use civilian ships as weapons. We would turn planets into fortresses and make you pay for every meter of space you claimed. By the time you defeated us, you would be asking if the victory was worth the cost. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, General Kwanho spoke, his voice very quiet. And, if we decided to restrict human military capabilities to prevent this possibility, then you would make war inevitable. Daun replied simply. Humans will not accept being made helpless. If you try to disarm us, you will prove that we were right to be armed in the first place. Commander Hyun-ki rubbed his scaled temples. This is impossible. We cannot allow humans to continue military training if they are this dangerous. But we cannot restrict them without starting the very conflict we fear. Daun stepped closer to the council table. May I offer a suggestion? Instead of fearing human military capability, use it. Humans do not want to fight you. We want to be your allies. We understand war, yes, but we also understand peace. We have spent the last 70 years proving that we can be trusted. Do not throw that away because one cadet showed you the truth about what humans can do when necessary. Admiral Boare considered this. What you are suggesting is that we accept humans as military partners, knowing their full capabilities? I am suggesting that you already have been partnering with humans, Daun said. You just did not know what you had. Now you do. The question is whether you will trust us or fear us. The council debated for another hour, but the fundamental problem remained unsolved. News of Jiwoo's simulation had already begun spreading beyond the academy. By morning, it would be all over the galactic networks. They could not suppress it and they could not ignore it. Meanwhile, in the cadet dormitories, Jiwoo sat in her small room staring at her data pad. Messages were flooding in from other human cadets, from instructors, from military officials back on Earth. Some praised her. Some criticized her for exposing human capabilities. Some simply asked her why she had been so honest. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Taemin standing there with 3 other human cadets. Their expressions were serious. "Ji-woo," Taemin said quietly. "We need to talk. You have changed everything. The academy, the military, maybe the entire galactic political structure. Whether you meant to or not, you have revealed what humans are capable of. There will be consequences."
Ivo nodded slowly.
"I know. I just answered the question that was asked. I showed them the truth." "The truth," said another cadet named Subin, "is going to terrify them." "Good," Ji-woo replied, surprising them. "Let them be terrified. But also let them know that we use that capability to protect, not to conquer. If they understand both parts, maybe they will trust us. If they only see the danger, then we have a much bigger problem." That night, across the galaxy, military analysts reviewed Ji-woo's simulation. Defense ministers received briefings. Intelligence agencies updated their assessments of human military capability. News networks debated whether humans were heroes or threats. On a distant frontier world, a species called the Vrex Dominion watched the recordings with particular interest. They were an aggressive, expansionist empire that had been probing galactic defenses for years, looking for weaknesses. They saw the human simulation not as a warning but as an opportunity. If humans could fight like that, the Vrex reasoned, then they could be useful as mercenaries or dangerous as enemies. Either way, the Vrex needed to know for certain. They began planning a test, a small military action that would force humans to reveal their true capabilities in actual combat rather than simulation. The Vrex chose their target carefully. A human colony world named Hanul Station, far from major galactic shipping lanes, defended by a small garrison. It was perfect for their purposes. They would attack, measure the human response, and withdraw before any galactic forces could intervene. They did not know that their small test would change the entire balance of galactic power. They did not know that humans had been quietly preparing for exactly this kind of scenario for 70 years. And they definitely did not know that the garrison commander at Hanul Station was Admiral Jae-sung, who had been Ji-woo's primary instructor at the Human Military Academy before she attended the Galactic Academy. The Vrex would learn. The Vrex fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Hanul Station system. 15 warships, a respectable force for what they believed was a simple test of human capabilities. Their commander, War Leader Dae-young, studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. Intelligence reports indicated the colony was defended by only 3 human corvettes and a handful of fighter squadrons. This would be easy. "Begin approach," Dae-young ordered. "Standard intimidation formation. Let them see what they face. We will give them one chance to surrender before we demonstrate human military capability to the galaxy." The Vrex fleet began its approach, engines blazing as they accelerated toward the colony. They broadcast their demands on all frequencies, demanding immediate surrender and promising minimal casualties if the humans complied. It was standard procedure, and Dae-young expected either immediate capitulation or a brief, futile resistance. What he got instead was silence. On Hanul Station, Admiral Jae-sung watched the approaching Vrex fleet on his command center displays. He was an older human, his hair completely gray, his face marked with the lines of someone who had seen real combat. He had fought in the border skirmishes during humanity's early expansion into space, back when Earth was still figuring out how to survive among the galactic powers. "Sir," his communications officer said nervously, "the Vrex are demanding our surrender. Should we respond?" Jae-sung smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "No response. Let them think we are paralyzed with fear. How long until they enter weapons range?" 15 minutes at current speed, sir." "Good. Activate Protocol Red Sky. Alert all colonists to shelter positions. Bring the ghost ships online." The communications officer blinked in surprise. "Ghost ships, sir? I did not know we had any." "That is the point," Jae-sung replied. "The galaxy thinks Hanul Station has 3 corvettes. We actually have 9 ships, plus significant modifications to the station itself. We have been using this place as a testing ground for new defensive doctrines. The Vrex just volunteered to be our test subjects. Around the colony, systems came alive that had been deliberately hidden from galactic sensors. Ships that appeared on official registries as civilian transports revealed themselves as armed vessels. Mining equipment and construction platforms rotated to show weapon systems that should not exist on civilian infrastructure. The station's docking arms unfolded, revealing missile batteries disguised as cargo handling equipment. Hanul Station transformed from a sleepy mining colony into a military fortress in less than 3 minutes. On the Vrex flagship, sensor operators began shouting warnings. "Sir, we are detecting multiple new contacts. The colony has more ships than reported. Unknown weapons systems activating across the station itself." War Leader De Jong frowned. "How many more ships?" "At least 6 additional contacts, possibly more. And, sir, the station itself is armed. Heavily armed. This was not in our intelligence reports." De Jong felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. This was supposed to be a simple test against a weak target. But, if the humans had been hiding their true defensive capabilities, then intelligence had failed catastrophically.
All ship, combat formation.
"Prepare for engagement. We will destroy them quickly and withdraw." The Vrex fleet spread out, adapting to the new threat assessment. They were still confident. 15 warships against 9 human vessels and a station. The numbers favored them significantly. Admiral Jae-sung watched the Vrex formation adjust and nodded with satisfaction. They are reacting exactly as predicted. They still think this is a conventional battle. Commence Operation Hornet's Nest. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations. The human ships did not form defensive positions around the station. Instead, they scattered in apparently random directions, some accelerating toward the Vrex fleet, others moving away at odd angles. It looked like panic, like undisciplined chaos. It was actually a carefully rehearsed maneuver that human naval forces had practiced for decades. The Vrex fleet moved to engage the nearest human ships, focusing fire on targets that appeared isolated and vulnerable. They destroyed 1 human corvette within the first minute of combat, its shields collapsing under concentrated fire. Then they destroyed another. War Leader De Jong allowed himself a moment of relief. Perhaps the intelligence reports had been mostly correct after all. These humans died as easily as anyone else. Then the trap closed. The human ships that had appeared to scatter randomly were actually moving into precise positions around the Vrex fleet. They had sacrificed 2 corvettes to lure the Vrex into a kill zone. Now the remaining human vessels opened fire from multiple vectors simultaneously, targeting specific weak points in Vrex ship designs that should have been classified information. But humans were very good at stealing classified information. The Vrex fleet took heavy damage in the opening seconds of the real engagement. 3 cruisers suffered critical hits. 2 destroyers lost main power. The humans were not firing randomly but with surgical precision, hitting exactly where Vrex armor was weakest and shields were most vulnerable. "How do they know our defensive specifications?" De Jong demanded. "Those designs are classified." His intelligence officer looked sick. "Sir, I believe humans have had access to our technical specifications for years. They have been preparing specifically to fight us." De Jong realized with horror that this was not a test. It was an ambush. The humans had been expecting this attack, had been ready for it, possibly for years. "All ships withdraw. Full reverse thrust." But the human forces were not finished. Hanul Station itself opened fire, launching missiles that had been hidden in cargo containers and mining equipment. The missiles did not target Vrex ships directly. Instead, they detonated in a pattern around the Vrex fleet, creating a massive debris field from their own fragmentation. The Vrex ships, trying to retreat, suddenly found their sensor systems blinded by millions of tiny metal fragments. Their point defense systems went into overdrive, trying to track and destroy what they thought were incoming projectiles. In their confusion, they began firing on phantom targets. The human ships, equipped with sensors designed to penetrate debris fields, moved through the chaos like sharks through murky water. They picked off isolated Vrex vessels with methodical efficiency. Within 10 minutes, 8 Vrex ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 7 managed to break free of the engagement zone and begin their withdrawal. But the human ships pursued, harrying them all the way to the system's edge, ensuring they took additional damage during their retreat. War leader De Jong's flagship was among the survivors, but barely. His ship had lost half its weapon systems and suffered critical damage to its engines. As they limped away from Hanul Station, he stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. 15 ships. He had brought 15 ships to test a weak colony. He was leaving with 7 damaged vessels and 8 wrecks behind him. Send a priority message to High Command, he said quietly. Tell them that humans are not weak. Tell them that humans have been preparing for war since they joined the galactic community. Tell them that we have awakened something that we do not understand. On Hanul Station, Admiral Jae-sung watched the Vrex retreat with grim satisfaction. He had lost 2 corvettes and suffered damage to 3 more vessels. His casualty count was 43 military personnel killed, 92 wounded. By galactic standards, these losses were catastrophic for such a short engagement. By human standards, he had achieved an overwhelming defensive victory against a numerically superior enemy. Sir, his communications officer said, we are receiving priority messages from Earth, from Galactic Command, from the Academy. Everyone wants to know what happened here. Tell them the truth. Tell them that humans defended their territory successfully. Tell them that we used appropriate force to repel an unprovoked attack. And tell them that any other species considering similar tests should study the Vrex fleet's fate carefully. Within hours, the battle at Hanul Station was broadcast across the entire galactic communications network. Recordings from the station's external cameras showed the entire engagement in brutal detail. The galaxy watched humans fight with the same ferocity and unconventional tactics that Jiwoo had demonstrated in her simulation. But this was not a simulation. This was real combat with real casualties against a real enemy. And humans had won decisively. The political earthquake that followed made the controversy over Jiwoo's exam seem trivial by comparison. Some species demanded immediate restrictions on human military forces. Others quietly began seeking defensive alliances with humanity. A few, like the Vrex, simply withdrew and reassessed everything they thought they knew about galactic power dynamics. On the Galactic Military Academy, Commander Hyun-ki received a priority message from Admiral Boare. It contained a single question. Should we still be debating whether to pass Cadet Jiwoo's examination? Hyun-ki looked at the recordings from Hanul Station, then at the recordings of Jiwoo's simulation. The tactics were similar. The ruthless efficiency was identical. The willingness to accept high costs for victory was the same. He sent his reply, we should graduate her immediately, and we should pray that humans remain our allies.